Okay, so Kamarul, as we all know, the government already cancelled the SKIN contract and now Prestariang is dragging it to court. So, good move, bad move?
I think it is something that the board doesn't really have a choice in, because it is their fiduciary duty to bring the government to the court because it is part of their contract. The government actually unilaterally terminated the contract. So the board of Prestariang has to take the government to court to get the compensation because it is part of the contract. There is a formula, according to the board of Prestariang, there is a formula that has been included into the contract if in the case of unilateral termination, how much the government has to pay Prestariang.
Yeah. Because they're seeking compensation of more than 700 million ringgit, right? So now the SKIN contract at 3.5 billion ringgit, what was the main issue that the government decided to just cancel it?
So after GA14, the government started to review every big contracts, every big agreements
that was signed by the previous administration,
that was signed
right?
by the previous government that they entered into. So for the Home Ministry, this is I think this is the biggest contract that they got into for a concession of 15 years. The total contract cost is 3.5 billion ringgit, and the Home Ministry feels that this is a very expensive contract for the immigration control system. So they asked for a review of the contract, look at whether there is any kind of loopholes or if there's any kind of lopsided agreement between the two. So they decided that there are, and they wanted to terminate the contract unilaterally because Prestariang hasn't defaulted in their part of the agreement. So it wasn't like Prestariang defaulted in their duty, and that's why the contract was terminated. No.
But did Prestariang try to justify the cost?
Yeah, they did. They did because first of all, why they are called to do this project is because the current immigration control system is quite not up to the par, especially if you compare to other developed countries. For instance, if you go through the autogate in KLIA, sometimes the autogate doesn't open even after it reads your passport, and then the immigration officer would just ask you to do it again, and then only the autogate opens. So it means, it seems to show that the system has read your data twice. So it's like, there are actually two persons going out instead of just one. So that is one of the problem. And then the system also is not comprehensive. In the sense that other sources or other users of immigration control could not, information from them cannot be accessed by the immigration control officer at the border. For example, if there's someone who is needed for certain kind of crime, when the immigration officer his data, he cannot make a very good judgment on that at that time because he has to clear that person within, probably like within just 5 minutes, which the system doesn't allow him to make a very good judgment. The current system doesn't allow him to make a very good judgment.
So, in your story, you did question if it was a wise move for Prestariang to bring Putrajaya to court. Now, if you have spoken to Home Ministry, what did they have to say about this? Because since the contract was signed by the previous administration.
We did ask the Home Ministry for comments, but they don't want to comment because since this project has been, this case has been in the court. So, but from previous statements by the Home Ministry, it seems to show that they are trying to get a lower contract, a lower cost for the contract. But this is quite funny because before the contract was terminated, Prestariang actually sent a lot of letters to the ministry to negotiate the contract, to ask what is going on, what went wrong, what is the problem. So or if they need to renegotiate to reduce the cost or the scope of the contract to a more palatable level. But the ministry, according to Prestariang, the ministry didn't responded to any of their letters until it was terminated.
So Ms. Prestariang did, it's safe to say that they did exhaust all efforts to get a response from Home Ministry. So Tan Sri Muhyiddin, he said that there was no point in reviving SKIN, but then weeks later, his ministry actually called for bids for a cheaper and an alternative option to SKIN. The question is there a possibility that Prestariang will compete for this project as well?
I asked this question and they said no, they're not going to participate in this project. Probably because one, how are you going to do that when you already have a contract and that contract was terminated unilaterally, and you already brought the government, your client, to the court, right? So they don't feel like there is a way for them to participate in another tender. Yeah, so they're just going to fight for the compensation, which is 700 plus million ringgit, and even the market is expecting that. The market doesn't expect them to bid for another contract.
For more on the stories, pick up a copy of the Age Weekly at all good newsstands.